Hey guys, Josh here. My favorite game series of all time is Bokujo Monogatari, currently known in the West as Story of Seasons, and prior to 2014, Harvest Moon. This year, I'm planning to go back and play all of the mainline home console games, from the very first Harvest Moon on the SNES all the way up to Animal Parade on the Wii. I'm gonna be skipping the handheld, spin-offs, and most recent Switch titles for this current series, but I'll make sure to talk about each and every game eventually on this channel, so make sure to subscribe if you don't want to miss out. In these reviews, I'll go over the history of each game, their gameplay mechanics, the changes they brought to the series, some interesting facts, as well as my thoughts on if and how should you play these games in 2022 and beyond. I'm also going to be making some tips and tricks videos to supplement my reviews, in case you do decide to play any of the games I'll be talking about. So to start this series, let's go back to the very beginning with Bokujo Monogatari, which released for the Super Famicom in Japan in August 1996, and then on the Super Nintendo in North America under the name Harvest Moon in June 1997, and lastly for Europe in January 1998. The game was produced by Yasuhiro Wada, who grew up in the Japanese countryside, and when he moved to Tokyo and got his first job at a game publishing company called Pakin Video, he was inspired to create a game that would portray life in the countryside. But also, he wanted to create a game that did not involve combat, which was quite a unique concept at a time before cozy simulation games became the popular genre that it is today. After 2 years of building up a portfolio and proving his potential to the higher-ups at the company, he pitched his idea and they allowed him a small team and budget to work on the game. The team consisted of 10 people, including of course Yasuhiro Wada, who was producing, Setsuko Miyakoshi, who was working on the story, and Tomomi Yamatate, the lead programmer. Progress was slowly being done on the game. However, after about a year, the company developing the game, AMCUS or AMCCUS, which was the actual developer and Pakin Video was the publisher, so the developer unfortunately had to shut down. According to Yasuhiro, they had been taking on way too many different projects for the limited resources that they had, and so they were not doing very good financially. The president of the company then completely disappeared, teams were scattered, and everyone was just left with unfinished game data. So that was a very unfortunate situation for Harvest Moon. However, encouraged by his co-workers Setsuko Miyakoshi and Tomomi Yamatate, Yasuhiro Wada decided to not give up and finish the project anyway. The small team brought their computers back from the developer's studio, and they made a small spot in their office to finish working on the game by themselves. At the time, Harvest Moon was only about 30% complete, but Yasuhiro was able to negotiate an additional 6 months to work on the game, as well as the budget to hire 2 more employees. They faced a lot of issues, not only because of the time and budget constraints, but also because of the hardware limitations of the Super Nintendo. They had to cut out a lot of content that was originally planned for the game. They had to redo a lot of assets, and actually Setsuko Miyakoshi, who was originally working on the story, also had to work on some assets because most of the original team was no longer there, and the programming had to be redone from scratch as well. And they did all of this in order to optimize the game as much as possible and make sure it runs smoothly on the SNES, but also they were really trying to get a complete game in time. In the end, even though the team was very small and everyone had to fill in multiple roles, they did manage to get the game out, and while it only sold 20,000 copies in the first shipment, and the game didn't please to everybody of course because it was a very new concept, some people loved it, and those people were very passionate, and by word of mouth, the game ended up selling over 100,000 copies, and it finally did become profitable. So this is a summary with the key points of the history of the game. I'm gonna be putting a link in the description to a talk by Yasuhiro Wada at Game Developers Conference in 2012. If you'd like to listen to the whole thing, I think it's very interesting. But for this video, I just wanted to highlight the most important points as it will help us in understanding the game as well as the series as a whole. But before we start talking about the actual game, I'd like to quickly mention my personal history with it, as reviewing retro games can be a bit tricky and sometimes nostalgia can play a big part in our opinion. So actually in my case, I didn't grow up with a Super Nintendo, so I did not have the chance to play Harvest Moon on original hardware when it came out. My first Harvest Moon game was Harvest Moon 64, however, the game later released on the eShop for the Wii, And since I had been a fan of the series for a while at that time, I decided to give it a try, and that was the first time I played it. Admittedly, however, I did not play too much at that time, since I felt like it was quite lacking compared to other games I was playing then, so I kinda gave up on that game. But this month, I had the chance to give it another chance and play it again, and it was really interesting to take a look at the very beginning of the series. And over 25 years later, we can see that it has come a really long way. Okay, now we can start talking about the gameplay. So, being the very first game in a genre that didn't previously exist, Harvest Moon was very innovative, with most of the game mechanics being completely new to most players. It established the core farming mechanics and gameplay loop. So you have different tools with which you till the soil, plant seeds, water them, harvest them, ship them, and get some money to buy more seeds or upgrades for your farm. This works pretty much exactly the same as in most recent farming games, which shows that the formula works. However, as much as the formula works, this first entry shows how far we've come in terms of quality of life improvements. In this game, you can only carry 2 tools with you at a time, and you'll have to pick them up at the shed every time you want to change. For example, in the morning, you might want to pick up your hammer and axe to clear some space in your field before you can plant some seeds. So once that's done, you'll go back to the shed, switch your hammer and axe for the hoe and seeds. You'll till the soil, plant the seeds, then you'll go back to the shed and pick up the watering can, and then you'll water the crops. After that, you'll want to take care of your animals, so you'll go back to the shed, switch your tools for the brush and milker. Then you'll go to the barn, and then if you want to go in the forest to chop some trees, you'll go back to your shed, you'll switch again your tools for the axe. So you get the idea, it's just a lot of back and forth to the shed in order to switch your tools. As for the items, such as the crops you'll harvest, there's no backpack or storage in this game, so every time you pick up a crop, or maybe a berry you picked up in the forest and you want to sell, you'll have to go to the shipping bin and sell them one by one. So once an item is in your hand, you either put it in the shipping bin, you give it to someone, you throw it away, but you can't just press a button and have it in your backpack because there's no inventory, so you have to do something with it, and it is a little bit inconvenient at first, but to be fair, you get used to these mechanics pretty quickly, and my intention here is not to be harsh on a 25-year-old game, but more to show how the series and gaming in general has evolved, and things that we now take for granted, like an inventory system, were not very common back in 1996. Okay, so let's go back to our crops. So in the Harvest Moon, there are 2 crops in spring, turnips and potatoes, which grow pretty quickly but need to be replanted after each harvest. And there are 2 crops in summer, corn and tomatoes, so these ones do take a bit longer to grow initially, but they can then be harvested every couple of days. This allows the game to have quite a different pacing between these 2 seasons, as in spring you'll constantly be having to buy new seeds and plant them again, whereas in summer you'll most likely just buy seeds once at the beginning of the season, but these crops will keep you very busy with their multiple harvests, and you'll be making quite a lot more money. In spring and summer you can also plant grass, which is used to feed your animals. You can also buy food at the animal store, but it ends up being quite expensive. Grass in this game doesn't have to be watered, and it can be harvested with a sickle every few days all the way until the end of fall. But one thing to note is that you can't plant it in fall, so just make sure you plant it before the end of summer. And also, once summer is over, this game doesn't offer much to do in the last 2 seasons of the year. So on top of cutting your grass, you can still do some foraging or fishing in fall, but in winter the only thing you can do is pretty much feeding your animals and going to sleep. So really most of the game will be happening in spring and summer. I actually found this pacing quite interesting, as in most recent games in the series, you can find things to do and keep yourself busy all year round. But this one I think attempted to portray maybe a more realistic side of the country life, which means there's really not that much to do in winter, and I think this gives a certain charm to the end of the year, some sort of feeling of loneliness, which is interesting at first but gets boring after a while, and I end up just sleeping all the way until spring. So once again, that game was very experimental, and later in the series, winter will be a bit more fun in terms of gameplay, but it was quite lacking in this game. So as I said, in winter you'll mostly be taking care of your animals. In this first game you have chickens and cows. So chickens will give you eggs, which you can place in the incubator, and that will give birth to a new chick after a few days. Or you can put the egg in the shipping bin to get some money. Cows, on the other hand, will give you milk that you'll get by using the milker you can buy from the tool shop. There's also a brush, and if you brush your cows and talk to them regularly, you'll get higher quality milk. Cows can get sick in this game if they are not fed or if they're left outside during rain or storm, and they have to be healed with a medicine from the animal shop. Chickens, on the other hand, if left unfed, they will simply stop laying eggs for 3 days, but they cannot get sick. However, if you leave them outside at night, they can get eaten by wild dogs. So personally, during my playthrough, I never let my animals outside because it takes a long time just to bring them outside and bring them back in, and time goes by really fast in this game. And I was always scared of forgetting them and having my chickens eaten by wild dogs or my cows getting sick. As for me, I think it's better to just keep your animals inside in this game. And also, other than that, you have a dog, which doesn't have much use. Besides, if you want to get the best ending, you'll have to pick your dog up 100 times during your playthrough. So that's the only reason why the dog is here, and of course it's also very cute. You also have a horse in this game, which you can ride on your farm. However, it can't go outside of your farm. But most importantly, it serves as a portable shipping bin, meaning you can throw your crops at your horse to sell them instead of running to your shipping bin every single time, so that sort of makes up for the lack of inventory system. So just like with the crops in Harvest Moon, the animals were pretty simple, but they established the basics for the series. And in terms of other things to do beside farming, so there are 10 secret power berries to find in this game, and they kind of encourage you to explore and try different things. And when you find those berries, they will increase your stamina, allowing you to accomplish more things in a day. House upgrades are also available, and the first one will cost you 250 lumber and 5000 G, and it's required in order to get married. And the second upgrade costs 500 lumber and 10,000 G, and it's required to have children. So these are the only 2 upgrades for the farm, so there's no need to keep collecting lumber or to save a lot of money once you get those upgrades. And also another thing you can upgrade is your tools. So each tool has a basic version that you get at the beginning of the game and a gold version that is more powerful. They're all found in different ways by playing and triggering some cutscenes, and you can get most of them within the first year, so they're pretty easy to get. For example, for the golden hoe, during fall, a harvest sprite will come to your farm and ask for something to eat. So if you give him something to eat, then the next day he will give you the golden hoe. And if you don't, then the hoe will become available at the tool shop. So most tools are like that. There's a way to get them for free, or you can buy them at the shop later. And I feel like it adds some variety to the gameplay. As I said, they're not very challenging or anything like that, but I think it spices things up a little bit compared to the regular formula we'll see later in the series for upgrading your tools. Another staple of the series that was introduced in this game is the interaction with the townspeople. The game has 2 festivals per season, except in summer there is none. And that's okay because you'll be so busy taking care of your crops, especially as time goes fast in this game. So there's 2 festivals in spring, 2 in autumn, 2 in winter. And I think they're pretty fun. My favorite one is the egg hunt, in which you have to run around town and try to find the eggs of the correct color. There are also a few festivals where you'll get to pick a girl to dance with, and I found the dancing cutscenes very cute. During most festivals, everybody gets drunk on juice. Yep, juice, which is not something you would see in recent entries in the series, so I think that was quite interesting. And you'll also notice that the dialogues are extremely simple, and on top of that, the translations from Japanese are very rough. But I think it does add a certain charm to the game. Just don't expect any complex character development or as many cutscenes as we get in later games. But the most interesting characters in this game are definitely the 5 girls that you can marry. So there's Anne, Nina, Ellen, Eve, and Maria. And I decided to marry Nina for this playthrough, and she lives at the flower shop. Your wife's outfit will change after marriage, and for the most part, they'll just stay around your farm, but they won't help you with any of the work, which is a bit of a shame. But you can also have 2 children in this game, and you'll want to get them as soon as you can if you're aiming for the best ending. So this game ends after the 3rd year, so there are over 20 different endings, and the ones you'll get will depend on the amount of animals that you have, the crops that you shipped, whether you're married or not, and things like that. So I'll be putting a link in the description to a website that shows all the different endings, and their requirements, so make sure to check that out if you're interested. I really like the idea of having these different endings and the challenge of trying to get everything done in time for the ending you're trying to get. What is a bit more unfortunate is that you can't continue to play after 3 years, so the game just ends. However, since the content is fairly limited, I don't think most people would actually want to continue playing that much after the 3rd year. One thing I have to say though, I can definitely imagine how before the days you could easily find all of the endings on the internet, how fun it could be to just replay the game and try to play in a different way to get different endings. And I think this probably added quite a lot of replay value to the game at the time of the original release. And now I'd like to talk about the art in this game, starting with the characters. Characters were designed by Kenji Koyama and illustrated by Igusa Matsuyama, who ended up illustrating them for most of the series. But Harvest Moon was actually the first big project for Igusa, and I wasn't able to find early drawings, but apparently they changed a lot throughout the development of the game, as Igusa was still a fairly new illustrator and he was gaining a lot of experience while working on the illustrations for Harvest Moon. And also you can clearly see a big evolution if you compare his illustrations from Harvest Moon on the SNES with his latest works. This game did not have that many characters, and as I mentioned previously, they did not have a lot of dialogue. However, everyone had a distinct look. Their in-game appearance was pretty simple due to the limitations of the console, and there were no portraits. In fact, you could not even see the name of the person you were talking to, but the game manual features drawings and information on each of the 5 marriage candidates, which makes it a little bit easier to get attached to them and decide which one to marry. But as for all of the other characters, it's really hard to get to know them because they don't have a lot of dialogue, and there's not much information about them in the game manual, so the game definitely focuses on the marriage candidates. Also, I think the graphics as a whole age pretty well. It can sometimes be hard to go back to games from that era, but for this one, I really did not mind. In fact, I really was able to appreciate the beautifully done pixel art, and I could even see where Eric Barone took his inspiration in creating Stardew Valley. There's a lot of similarities in the art style. And also I gotta say I really enjoyed how each season looked very distinct from each other and had its own unique atmosphere. This is even more true thanks to the music. Once again, the first Harvest Moon introduced what would be a staple in the series, and I think one of the things I like the most about this series, and that's the seasonal music. Composed by Tsuyoshi Tanaka, each month has its own theme that helps convey the feelings of the season. I won't talk too much about it, I'll just let you guys enjoy a bit of each seasonal theme. So what do you think? They're also catchy and enjoyable to listen to, and for some variety you'll also get to hear different music when in town or in the mountains, as well as during the festivals. So please don't play this game on mute, as you're gonna be missing out on an important part of the experience in my opinion. Overall, considering the limitations of the system and how small their team and budget was, I think they managed to do pretty well in terms of graphics and music. I think we can say the same for this game as a whole. It's not perfect, but they had to cut a lot of content from the original ideas. However, this game created a whole new genre of game. Isn't that crazy? It established a farming system, animals, festivals, and tons of game mechanics that are still used in farming games in 2022. Without this game, things would probably be quite different in the world of simulation games, and my channel would probably not be here, or it would be very different. So should you play this game in 2022? Honestly, it depends. If you played this game as a kid and have a lot of nostalgia for it, well, I say go for it and play it again, you'll definitely enjoy it. And if you're like me and you love farming games and you're curious about experiencing what was the first farming game like, and you want to see how the series and the genre evolved over the last 25 years, approaching it maybe more from a historical angle and not simply because you're looking for a new farming game to play, I think you will have fun as much as I did. However, if you're simply looking for a new farming game to play and spend hundreds of hours on, you might be disappointed by the lack of content and features in this game. It is very rudimentary and there's not that much to do, and while I think there are definitely older games in this series that are worth experiencing even for new players, I think this might not be the one. So if you want to get this game, it was previously available on the eShop for the Wii, which is now unavailable, but you can still get it on the Wii U, just make sure you do so before that one inevitably shuts down as well. I really hope it would be added to the SNES games available with the Nintendo Switch Online, but they have not been adding new games in quite some time now, so I don't think it's gonna happen. Of course, you can play it if you have an original SNES, which is probably the best way to experience this game, but honestly, the easiest way to play this game, unfortunately, is currently through emulation. If you're planning to play this game, in a few days I'm going to be posting a tips videos, so keep an eye out for that and let me know your thoughts on Harvest Moon for the SNES in the comments below. Leave a like and subscribe if you'd like to see more content like this, and I'll see you all next month for my review of Harvest Moon 64.